Hello everyone! This week we wanted to do an update on the orchids I got for my birthday this year, show you how we repot them and how they're doing 6 months later. If you saw the unboxing video, you know that some of the plants I picked myself, but others were surprises from my family.
The first orchid out of the box was Haraella retrocalla. Although small, the plant was in pristine condition. Since it was quite inexpensive, we weren't expecting a big specimen.
We decided to keep it potted for now, and this orchid was incredibly hard to pot up, because of it being so tiny and the roots being short. My small bark seemed huge in comparison. I had to use tweezers to adjust the plant and the bark since it kept falling off. I also added some sphagnum on top to maintain moisture and to help secure the orchid.
And here's what it looks like now. It developed a few good roots. It didn't grow a lot of new leaves, but I think the plant looks healthy overall. And I didn't notice at first, but it seems to be developing a flower spike.
Next was Ceratostylis retisquama, or rubra, and it arrived looking healthy but in need of a repot. When orchids come with this dense of a root system, I like to nestle some medium in the middle of the roots, and then place the plants inside the pot.
Schwerter usually sends moisture-loving plants in that medium with pebbles. Considering that and what we read, we decided to use what turned out to be a bit too much sphagnum in the repot, which means we've been really careful to not overwater.
As you can see, the orchid is now much more stable in the pot, which shows that it must be growing roots even though we can't see it through the pot.
We have compared this plant to pictures online, and it looks quite different from others, so we don't know if it's not an adult plant like they said, or if it's just mislabeled, which unfortunately has happened to us before with Schwerter.
Next orchid out was Ascocentrum pusillum, and I still can't believe this tiny vanda is a flowering size orchid. Because this plant came with a lot of roots, it was a bit of a slow process to remove it from the mount. There was a lot of slowly pulling the roots through the holes, just to make sure that nothing was damaged.
And as you can see from this dried flower spike, this is definitely an adult plant.
The mount actually had 2 plants, and the hardest part of this repot is wrangling the 2 of them and the root systems into the pot. And it's made even harder by the fact that we chose a net pot. Since this is a vanda and most people keep these mounted, we didn't want to risk it with a normal pot.
And here's the orchid now. It's looking good, it has grown some roots, and by this leaf you can tell how much it's grown.
Next we got another tiny bare-rooted orchid, Capanemia superflua. Even though this is technically from the Oncidium family, most people keep it mounted, and it is said that it likes to dry quickly, so we used only bark for this one.
And if we look at the plant nowadays, one of the pseudobulbs has dried off, but it's putting out a new one that's looking great. It also lost some of the roots, but there are new ones developing. So I would say for now, this orchid is holding on.
Next out of the box is Neostylis pinky. This orchid has definitely flowered before, and it came with an amazing root system.
Now you'd think that repotting these bare root vandas would be easy, but that awful little basket is always a pain to remove, so we always end up having to break them to bits.
After that, all we had to do is trim off some dead roots and try and fit and adjust the huge root system inside the net pot. We used really large bark for added ventilation, since this orchid is used to being bare-rooted.
And here she is now. You can tell it has grown a ton of roots and the keiki is developing nicely. We keep it hanging in the window so it's getting some color but no sunburns.
Now it's Phalaenopsis equestris coerulea, An orchid I've wanted for the longest time. This one is 1 year from flowering, but I'm happy to finally have one.
The thing with these orchids that come in pure sphagnum is that they have a harder time adapting to bark, but they're so easy to unpot. That big root that came with was really annoying to have offside of the pot.
We actually ended up being able to put that root back in the pot, but mostly because the other roots started growing and lifting the plant out of the soil, so we were able to kind of tuck it inside again. So that might mean we have to repot this plant sooner. It also grew a brand new leaf. Next up, we have what might be, to me, one of the most beautiful Paphiopedilums, both flower and foliage. And of course, it wouldn't be me doing a repot without a bug rescue situation. Other than that, I find paphs really easy to repot. The roots usually keep the shape of the pot, and you just have to fill the center with fresh media. In this case, lots of sphagnum like we usually do with our Paphiopedilums.
As you can see, the paph is looking great. It grew 2 brand new fans and even a couple of roots. This is another plant we got thinking of the terrarium we haven't gotten around to build yet, but we wanted to keep it potted while we don't have it.
Most information says you should just grow these species mounted or in bark, but I couldn't help putting a little bit of sphagnum on top. And I'm glad I did, because this plant still needed water almost every day in the summer.
When you look at this plant now, you can immediately see how many roots it has put out since we got it. Overall, it is growing well and adapting great to our care.
Next we have the Millennium Magic that arrived looking great. We know we could have just chopped off all the roots and wait for those new growths to produce new ones, but they seemed alive and healthy, so we decided to work this hard to remove them from that very tight sphagnum ball. Some of the roots had to be cleaned out, but overall we were left with a decent root system.
We used around 50% sphagnum for this, since catasetums like to drink a lot during growing season. And in winter we keep them mostly dry, so the sphagnum is not a problem. The plant wasn't very stable in the pot, so later on we added a stake.
Only one of the new growths ended up making it, and it put out a few roots but not a lot, so the plant looks a little dehydrated. We're hoping it's going to bounce back better next season.
This Phalaenopsis hybrid doesn't have much information on the internet about it. It was a really easy repot, but we seem to have lost some of the footage.
The plant is doing great, it made a ton of roots, and of course a few days after filming initially, we noticed a flower spike coming. So it's fair to say we're excited.
Next is Laelia pumila, a flowering size rupiculus Laelia. We ended up removing the tiny yellowing pseudobulb during the repot.
For this one, we also added some sphagnum to the pot. Even though they're in the Cattleya family, we found that our rupiculus Laelias like a bit more moisture.
And here she is now. In the past 6 months she has grown a ton of roots, 2 fully mature pseudobulbs and 2 other tiny ones, so we're hoping for flowers next year.
And this is the beautiful Aerangis kirky that came in a ceramic mount, looking really healthy.
In order to remove it from the mount, first we soak the whole thing for a few hours, then very delicately we coax the roots off the mount, which wasn't too difficult, and slowly pull the plant off the mount.
After cleaning all the sphagnum and dead roots, we had the complicated task of trying to force into a pot roots that were growing horizontally towards a mount. Because we had the plant soaking, they were more flexible and we avoided any breakage.
The plant did okay, and in August we were surprised with flowers.
And now she's giving us another flower spike. We're not sure why it's blooming again, but it really isn't a bad surprise.
The newest leaves got a little burned, so we will be pushing it further away from the grow lights. Next is Phalaenopsis bronze maiden, or Schilleriana crossed with Manny, that we got 2 years from flowering.
The repot was really easy, and we used our usual bark and sphagnum mix that we use for all our Phalaenopsis species. Looking at the plant 6 months later, you can definitely tell the effects of our lights by the intensified freckling on the leaves. And the pot has exploded with roots, so I'd say this one is on the right track.
This is our first Tolumnia in a long time, and we could already tell the biggest problem was going to be making the roots growing up the side of the pot go down in order to make it fit a normal pot.
We soaked the plant really well, cut some of the dead roots, and gently tried to pull the roots down into the pot. This was another orchid we couldn't help but go against the guidelines and use a little bit of sphagnum, just a little bit, just so we don't have to spray it every day. Because of the roots adding tension, the plant ended up pretty wobbly in the pot, so we added a stake later on.
The orchid has since grown a new fan that put out a lot of roots. The extra sphagnum ended up being crucial in keeping it hydrated this summer, especially with the extra ventilation we added to the pot.
Next we have the very complicated Sedirea japonica that we got 1 year from blooming. We have done a bunch of research to try and keep this orchid alive, because according to everyone, it can be a bit finicky.
For now we have it in our usual mix, but since it came with added shells in a medium that we assume were there for extra calcium, we're considering getting some CalMag to supplement it. We're also going to try and keep it cooler in the winter, which some say is necessary to give it a break from growing.
If you look at the Sedirea now, it looks like it didn't grow that much. But if we look at the roots, we realize what the plant has been busy doing these past 6 months. The Christensonia vietnamica surprised me, because I thought the plant would be much bigger. We immediately got confirmation that this is an adult plant though, by finding a flower spike. It didn't bring too many roots as you can see, but the upside to that is that the repot is very easy.
That flower spike took a while to develop. We only got to see the flower last month. And here's what the plant looks like now.
I really gotta cut that old dried up flower spike off. The orchid doesn't seem to have made any new roots or leaves, probably just because it was busy with the flowers.
Next up we have the first of the two Phalaenopsis speciosa in this order. They are both supposed to be flowering size, but this one is so much smaller that I'm not too sure about it.
We opted to not use as much sphagnum with them as we do with our other Phalaenopsis species, because in our experience, they are a bit prone to rot.
And here she is now. To my eyes, she seems a bit bigger and has grown quite a lot of roots, so I really have some doubt this plant is flowering size.
The other Phalaenopsis speciosa is the blue-gray variety, and it is much bigger than the previous one. It came full of flower spikes and looking really nice. The roots were pretty much molded to the shape of the pot, so we decided to keep it in the same size pot and use again a sphagnum light mix.
One of the flower spikes actually developed a flower for us back in July. And it was a pleasure to see that hard-to-describe color in person.
These days the plant has put out a new leaf and created a lot of new roots. It does have these weird stripes on the leaves that I'm not sure what they are, but the plant does seem otherwise healthy.
This is Gastrochilus, another one that came in a ceramic mount. It arrived with the beginnings of a flower spike.
It wasn't too attached to the mount, so it was even easier to remove than the other one that came in ceramic. The plant had again to be placed in the pot at a weird angle, but this time the roots weren't growing upward as much, so it was also easier than the previous mount.
You can see that the plant grew a whole new leaf, but the flower spike unfortunately dried off. As you can see, this orchid has been busy making roots.
Next is the adorable Dendrobium aberrans. Most Dendrobiums to me look too unruly and bulky, but this one is so tiny with neat little pseudobulbs that I love it. After cleaning out the roots, it turns out that there were two separate plants in there that we potted in small bark with a little sphagnum.
Nowadays the orchid is still looking good, and put out these two beautiful and plump pseudobulbs. Something seems to be developing inside of them, but with this being our first Lotoria Dendrobium, I have no idea if that's what a flower spike is supposed to look like. And finally, our Phalaenopsis gigantea. It was supposed to be 1 year from flowering, but if you've seen photos of a flowering size gigantea, you'll understand why I doubt that claim.
This orchid didn't come with a lot of roots. And since it came in pure sphagnum, I used a more sphagnum heavy medium to ease the transition. The harder part of this repot is getting the medium in under those massive leaves.
I think nowadays that younger leaf is even bigger, and it's making a new baby leaf. We've kept the pot in a taller container so that the plant is closer to the lights. And as a result, we now have roots coming out of the bottom, to the point where we can't put the pot down. Overall, we think this orchid is doing well.
All in all, I think we've had good results these past 6 months, and the plants arrived healthy and remained healthy.
With this order, as with others we've made from the same nursery, the issues seem to be less about the health of the plant and more about whether the identification is correct, and if they are the flowering size stated in the website.
As annoying as those things might be, it still remains one of our favorite places to order from.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and found it helpful if you are thinking of ordering from Schwerter, or getting any of these plants. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and consider subscribing to our channel.
We'll see you next week. Goodbye.